Today on The State of Us, schools are alleging apps harm students and child predators are taking advantage of TikTok. Nearly 200 school districts so far have joined the litigation against the parent companies of Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. These suits have been consolidated in the U.S. District Court, along with hundreds of suits by families alleging harm to their children from social media. A new and interesting challenge to Section 230 of federal law. And we're also going to talk about child predators making TikTok every parent's nightmare, according to the Wall Street Journal. Law enforcement officials say the platform has become a danger zone. Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance Jackson.
Well, we're going to focus on this, and what we also have to understand that a big part of this comes down to parental interaction with children. And then what do we do? And this is my concern, right? What do we do for the children who don't have the parental interaction? And that's where
you mean not all students have parental interaction, Lance?
That's the concern, right? Is that as a society, we can all talk about how this is, hot button, and we need to do something about these companies and these apps that are causing our children harm. Totally agree with that. But I think the argument sometimes or the discussion that we don't have, or the argument that we miss, is what should society's role be when the parents aren't involved in the student's life? And that could be because they choose not to, or they're just not there because they've left the family situation either on their own accord or the law has made them go. But we have a lot of young people out there who are raising themselves, and many of us in society do not take the time to know that, because we just look at our situation and, well, I had two parents and I'm a parent to my children, so everybody has two parents who are active in their lives. And unfortunately, that doesn't exist. So keep that in mind as we're talking about this. And what role should society and the government take in protecting young people who maybe don't have adults in their life to protect them?
Plaintiffs' lawyers are pitching school boards throughout the country to file lawsuits against social media companies on allegations that their apps cause classroom disciplinary problems and mental health issues, diverting resources from education. The lawsuits are facing a test later this year when a judge is expected to consider a motion by the tech companies to dismiss the cases on grounds that the conduct allegedly causing the harm is protected under the Internet Liability Shield known as Section 230. The litigation amounts to an end run around the Section 230 law, which was passed by Congress in 1996, which says that the internet companies generally aren't liable for third-party content on their sites. The measure has been credited with fueling the rise of giant social media platforms such as Facebook and YouTube. In the lawsuits, school districts and families contend that the social media companies have created an addictive product that pushes destructive content to youth, that a product, unlike content, does not enjoy Section 230 protections. In their motion to dismiss the case, Facebook parent Meta Platforms, Snapchat owner Snap, Google parent Alphabet, and TikTok owner ByteDance say the harms alleged by plaintiffs still are protected under Section 230. Quote, the alleged defects are inescapably linked to the publication of third-party content, the companies wrote in a joint brief last month. They say allowing such suits would open the floodgates to litigation, causing online services to avoid liability by restricting the flow of information. The companies also deny that they are ignoring the dangers children face online. Quote, protecting kids across our platforms has always been core to our work, said a Google spokeswoman.
Okay, what I got from all of that was nobody's arguing that there are harms here. I mean, right? Neither side is arguing that what's being done is harmful to young people. Yet the argument is, what can we do about it? That's scary. They're not saying, you said that all of those different companies admitted, and they're working to do the best they can to protect kids. They admitted that, yes, there's bad things that are happening to young people because of our app, and we're doing everything we can to protect them. They are subversively admitting that it is harmful for young people, but you can't do anything to us because of that. Okay, well, folks, if they're admitting it and we know it, then we need to be doing something about it. That's number one, right? That to me, that's a no-brainer. So we need to get on the people that matter to rewrite the law, because nobody should be able to knowingly do something to harm children and be protected by the law through that. It's just like alcohol. We know that it harms the younger person's brain worse than it does anybody else and their function. And so what do? We've passed laws. And if somebody sells alcohol to a minor, they can get in a lot of trouble. Okay, so now we haven't admitted that these apps harm young people, but they're standing behind it saying, well, it's not our fault and we're doing what we can to protect them, but you can't do anything to us because the law says that you can't do anything to us. We need to change the law. I mean, it's that simple, because we don't let this happen in any other aspect of our society.
Yep. I think it's a fair point. We've talked about it a lot of times. I think there's a strong, if you're looking at purely just the legal argument, right? There's a strong argument to be made for the way Section 230 was written deals with content. And what they're saying is, yes, the content is harmful, but what we're upset about with the companies is the fact that they push that content, right? It's one thing for content to be passively available. It's an entirely other thing for you as the company to take an active role in developing an algorithm that's going to learn what somebody likes or learn what somebody spends time on, not necessarily what they like, because that's the constant defense. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute with TikTok and child predators, because that's another thing is, the algorithm, it just learns what people like. No, it learns what people pay attention to.
Right.
Those are not necessarily one and the same, right? We've talked about before, as humans, we have a predisposition to pay attention to concerning things, partly because it's an instinct that's built in, right? It's a survival technique of, if something bad's happening, you pay attention to what's going on so that hopefully you keep the bad thing from happening to you. I think we miss the boat so often on expressing how important of a difference that is, right? It's not that you're getting joy necessarily from watching what you're watching. It's that what you're watching keeps you engaged in what you're watching. And those are not always the same thing.
Well, notice, I'm not saying they shouldn't exist. I'm not crying. I'm not really crying for censorship, because I don't believe in censorship, but we ought to be doing something, right? I'm not saying take them away. It's just so hard for me because I don't want to take anything away from my children, but you have to have a relationship with your children to where you can talk to them about what they're seeing and what they're experiencing so that they can understand it. Well, because I don't want anybody to go into the library and take books away, right? I don't want that. I just can't stand those people that do that because, I don't want my children to be exposed to them. Okay, then don't let your children be exposed to them. But what right do you have to have other people's children not exposed to them? Okay, so it's like, that's why this was so hard for me, because there are so many parents that don't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so then these children are being harmed. So what's the answer then? Right? Because it should all be out there, and you should do your job as a parent. So many young people maybe don't have that parental influence available to them for multiple reasons. But I sure as heck, though, don't want those other parents to take away the right for what my children get to see and discuss in my home, because that just drives me up a wall even worse than what we're talking about. Why do you have the right to decide what all of us can see or do? But when I'm worried about the young people who don't have a parental positive parental influence in their life.
Well, and I guess, again, a distinction here, right? Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, those are parts of the internet. They aren't the whole internet, right? We're not suggesting, for example, that you make it impossible for a kid to access the internet. What we're saying is when we have the information we have that points to, and we've done this thing on, there's not enough research yet, to definitively conclude, but when countless experts across the spectrum tell us that this is having a profound impact on our children, and no, we can't tell you exactly what the impact is yet, but we know that it's a serious impact. It's affecting all these areas of their lives. That should be enough for us to say we made the mistake enough times in the past of allowing products, right? Let's talk about them as what they are, products to enter the hands of young people that caused harm, that we suspected caused harm, but that waited longer than we needed to decide to prevent young people or make it harder, because you can't really prevent, but make it harder for young people to have access to. And that's why I think this one is exactly what Lance said. It's not like we haven't done this in other areas. We discovered, right, that cigarettes can be incredibly harmful and very addictive. So we said, well, adults may have that choice, but we're not going to give that option to children. And same thing with alcohol. These things we know have a physiological effect, mental, physical effect on developing brains and developing bodies. So we are going to restrict access to them, and we're going to make sure that adults who try the end runaround, who are not their parents, will be punished for aiding and abetting access to those things. It doesn't make sense if we as a society want to stick with that line of thinking, then it doesn't make sense to not stay consistent with this. We have more than ample evidence to suggest that extended periods of time on these platforms with access to certain types of content isn't helpful. So on the one hand, we have this consensus among society that says we don't really understand how harmful, but we're pretty sure it's harmful. And on the other hand, we have no evidence suggesting that it's beneficial. And yet we've not done anything about it. But that's because, in part, well, why? Why haven't we done anything? Because it's hard, because it's complicated. What do we do? I don't know that that's an answer that still stands up. We're going to talk a little bit about TikTok, but we're also going to talk about what Lance and I have discussed before and some new ideas about how you could still give kids access, but change some of the defaults. We've talked about that before. What platforms default to is very important because most users don't change their default settings. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Default settings on apps. Something you probably haven't thought about much. Why haven't you thought about it much? Well, you download the app, you create your account, and you probably have a screen at some point that says, do you want to accept default settings? And they got all these things check marked, and you're like, whatever, and you just keep going. And you don't take time to read or think about what the default settings are. Default settings, though, play a huge role in how most people are going to experience and interact with an app. And notice I said people, not just kids, right? Everybody. Some apps have started to look at maybe the defaults for children should not be the same defaults that we're using for adults. One of those biggest ones, and this is pointed out in the TikTok article about how child predators are making use of the system, is that TikTok provides the option for you to make your content, the content that a teen creates, only available to your friends/followers. However, the default setting generally is that that's publicly accessible. And teens prefer it be publicly accessible. Why? Because they can get more likes that way and more engagement with their content. So here's one of those This sounds like minutia, but this is a very important distinction. Most of the apps start out with public-based settings, requiring two things, in my mind, make a huge difference. Requiring that the default setting for anybody under the age of 18 be only friends and or approved followers of your content. In other words, somebody follows you, you can see who they are and decide whether or not they can see your content, right? That be the default setting. And if you want somebody new to follow you or you want to add a new friend, maybe you should have to have parental approval for that.
But what if you don't have a parental?
Well, then your first one goes back to your default is that only people that, because I know that's an issue with the
I
second
understand
one.
the argument, but how do you enforce that? And I guess because you have young people who probably know more about what you just described than their parents in many cases, not all cases. There's my rub with that. Okay. I don't disagree in theory, but I'm trying to think of the practice. And you can come back to it, but I'm going to throw something else out here that I think is going to be very controversial, but that I feel very strongly about. Children spend 6 to 8 hours a day, 10 months out of the year in a place called school. What if we denied access to phones during school?
Novel concept. That sounds like when I went to school.
Right. Okay. Because we're not saying they can't go to any website, do whatever. I mean, okay.
Yep.
But we're saying during the school day when you're supposed to be learning, right? And the schools historically, legally have been classified in locus parentis, Latin for in place of the parents.
Yep. While you're at school.
Okay. Why don't we just then agree across the board in all school districts, and I know school districts are local, but just say, you know what? Our children are at school to learn at the behest of the children, and they do not need their phone because the schools, we are sending our children to the schools. Now, take all the parental action, school board meetings, all those things that you want to do, and we'll have our arguments there. I'm just saying, if young people are there to learn, why do they need a phone?
Yep. Well,
I now
haven't almost all schools adopted the policy of issuing technology to students anyway?
Right.
I mean, for the very reason of not all students.
Okay, but do you need technology to learn? Because there's the famous, the Silicon Valley parents have all outlawed technology in their schools. They want nothing but chalk and chalkboards. Because their children and their households
don't need it, but
are full
but
of
if the argument is we need to, if somebody's argument is that we want to prepare students to use technology, they're going to use their phone outside of school if they have one, right? And the whole reason, part of the huge reason that it was introduced, like for example, Chromebooks becoming ubiquitous in many schools, is for the very reason that many students couldn't afford or didn't have access to that type of technology, the type of technology we wanted them to use at school. Because this was a whole thing when I was.
But you don't need technology to learn. You don't need. How much money can you save? And I know I'm the old person, so I'm going to go old school on you, right? I'm going to defend this because we're reading all these articles and we're going to have future shows over them on how learning is not taking place in the classroom, right? Currently, compared to previous decades. Okay, there's nobody that's arguing that. Well, what has crept into the classrooms over the last 20 or 30 years? Technology. And we did it all in the name of, then there would be more learning taking place. Yet all of the same tests are showing us that there's less learning taking place now than there was 20 or 30 years ago. What's the major difference in every classroom in the last 20 or 30 years? More technology. So take that technology. They can still have all the technology they want. The other 16, 18 hours a day. But let's make school a place where you don't have any other outside concerns through a technological device. And let's just learn in school, whatever it is the local school board says, those students should learn.
I don't have any, qualms about saying, and I guess maybe it's because I still went to school at a time where if your phone was off and in your pocket, you could still get a detention because it was not allowed to be on your person.
Wasn't that long ago? We're not talking about last century.
I was in a classroom where somebody got caught with a phone in their pocket that was off, and their very defense to the teacher was, the phone was in my pocket, it was off, I wasn't looking at it, and the teacher said, the rules are that you can't have it on you. And they got a detention.
Right.
Because that's how, and I know if we have young people listening, it's like, oh my God, that's freaking crazy. Are you kidding me? It's off and in your pocket. How could that be? I have a right by God to hold my phone on me.
And the thing is, you don't.
Well,
you're a minor, okay?
Yeah.
But then my problem is not with the young people. They're going to follow whatever the rule is most of the time, right?
Well, the
problem are the parents. Well, I need to be able to get a hold of my child. No, you don't need to get a hold of your child at school. Your child is in school to learn. That is not for you to talk to them about what's going on in your life or in your family's life. And if it is an emergency, then you do it the old-fashioned way, like my parents did. You go to the school, you walk into the office, and you say, there is a problem at home. There's a problem within the family. I am going to sign my child out now. It worked forever. This constant, and the anxiety, we're not into that yet, sort of.
Well, we're teaching separation anxiety.
But the anxiety, we say, for young people, you can't take their phone away from them because that's their connection to the world. That's a problem, okay? If you say that and you believe that, that is, to me, the systemic root of the problem, is that we've created people under the age of 18 who are addicted, who need this phone to feel like they are somebody and have connections to the outside world. Therein is the systemic problem that faces our nation with our young people. And parents, if you're guilty of this, then shame on you. And that's where I stand. Hey, send your emails to podcast@stateofus.org. That's fine. You can, but I'm ranting at you, okay? That your child is there to learn, not hear from you, and not hear that you had a fight with your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend.
The Wall Street Journal reports that TikTok, the most downloaded social media app in recent years, has emerged as the biggest, fastest growing danger zone yet, according to law enforcement officials and others who track child exploitation. What troubles those who track child exploitation is that TikTok's algorithm is designed to learn what type of content users watch and then feed them a string of it. That keeps youngsters glued to the site and makes it easier for pedophiles to seek them out. A user who lingers on videos of, say, teens dancing gets sent more videos of the same thing. Like other popular social media sites, including Facebook and Instagram, TikTok allows users to restrict their postings to family and friends. Many teens choose to make their profiles fully public so that they can amass likes and use other popular functions, such as the one that allows them to post a video side by side with one from a stranger. Features like this, according to experts, are part of what the problem is.
Oh, so now I have to be liked by people who don't even know me to have any self-worth.
Well, because that's what we're teaching. See, this is where I would go back to.
My point exactly. Get rid of the phones. Yeah. The world worked, right? We did work.
It's that whole.
How many times have you been standing somewhere where somebody is waiting on you, right? They're supposedly working on the clock for another company. And while you're waiting for them to service whatever it is, they get out their phone and start diddling with their phone while they're supposed to be working. And then if I was a boss, I would go ballistic because I'm paying you. I'm not paying you to talk to your friends or to watch a TikTok video while you're supposed to be working at my place of employment. There's something inherently wrong with this that we've done to people. Adults included, not just young people.
But it is different because we've talked about adults that were adults before the technology came to rise consistently demonstrate a better ability and less total screen time. And one of the reasons for that is, and this is where the science comes in, right, is the development of the brain. It's very different to be sat in front of something that's addictive post-finished brain development than it is to be sat in front of something addictive pre your brain to finish developing. You're setting up, it's not, oh, kids are stupid and kids are bad. You're setting them up to fail. You are allowing them to become reliant and to wire their brains in a way that needs, and I'm not being facetious, needs this technology. Part of what we don't have great research on yet is, dopamine receptors and the release of positive rewards as it pertains to social media. But what we do have indicates, and we did this show it like a year ago, is that much of what social media companies employ in terms of animation and sound effects was learned from casinos in Vegas.
How to keep people entertained. Right.
Are we
okay with that?
Right.
For our children?
Are we okay with sending 14-year-olds to casinos in Vegas?
Right.
Has society deemed that to be an acceptable way for children to spend their time? The answer is no. We've said that it's not. We've said that you can't go into a casino until you're 21 years old. Then companies take the same tactics, many of the same tactics that casinos use, and deploy them in a learning-based algorithm that is designed to not only reward you with those same types of things that casinos do to encourage you to keep playing, but also now to customize that experience to you to make it even more addictive.
And I'm not talking about, because I know you say, people out there listening say, well, yeah, but Jackson, you're an old school teacher, all right? Okay, but I still work with young people in a homework and study environment and trying to work on get their GED. And guess what the rules are the 2 hours that they're with me?
No phone.
They can't have their phone. It's not allowed to be on their person. They can charge it if they want, but they're not allowed to use it. And you know what? Anecdotally, their grades go up and their learning goes up as well. And in all cases. So when you say they can't do it, right?
Yeah. Well, they can.
They can do it. Do they like it? No. Is there pushback? Yes.
Some of the things that are the best for us as people are the things we least like.
Right.
So, what about the additional dangers that TikTok poses? Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. A 42-year-old Alabama man uploaded to TikTok videos of himself lip-syncing to music and sharing depressive thoughts. A 14-year-old Texas girl responded. Before long, the two were exchanging romantic notes visible to anyone on the platform. Quote, "Married for life, baby," end quote, the teen commented on one of his posts. He responded, quote, "Yes, baby, married for life," end quote. Several TikTok commenters accused him of inappropriate conduct. Quote, "This dude has been stalking a little girl's account, guys," end quote, wrote one. Last March, he hopped a bus to Texas and met up with the girl. Several days later, he was arrested, and he was later indicted on charges related to sexual assault of a child. Quote, "I fell in love with her," end quote, said the man in an interview from a county jail in Fort Worth. As of Tuesday, he had not entered a plea. Adults have been starting improper relationships with minors online since the dawn of the internet. TikTok, which is the most downloaded social media app in recent years, has emerged as the biggest and fastest growing danger zone, according to law enforcement officials and others who track child exploitation. We talked about some in the last segment. Part of the reason that that's happening, we're still talking about what do you do about that? And I thought the show that we did a number of months back now, Lance, was very interesting on when polling young people on should you be allowed to have, or actually I think the question was worded, would you be okay with being prohibited from having a social media account until the age of 16? The majority of young people who responded to this survey said yes, they would be okay with that. And when asked if they thought that that would be good, better for them than having access, they also indicated yes. So
are they crying out for help?
So the young people have a sense that this is bad. They're having difficulty controlling it. They're willing to have it restricted, and the adults are leaning back and saying, we're making money.
Well, I don't want to make my child different than everybody else.
Right. Well, but that goes back to then it's time as a society to act and say this is no longer acceptable. Statistically, it is too likely that regardless of the stability of your child, that this will have negative impacts and not yield positive ones. I go back to that again. The barrier of proof with children should be less, is it going to hurt them or is it going to help them? Why are we looking at it through the lens of, is it going to hurt them? Well, we don't know, so I guess it's okay. That's the definition. Why would we not want to raise children under the auspice of, is this something that will benefit them? If the answer is, I don't know, or no, then why would we be okay with giving access to it without more research?
Well, on a recent show, we'll deny them chocolate milk because that's bad for them.
Right.
But we will allow them to have internet access to meet up with adults who want to do them harm. We have no problem passing a law saying you can't have flavored milk or whole milk in schools, but we'll allow them to have internet access with adults who may want to do them harm.
Does anybody
Come on, I mean, it's just,
listening to the show take that in and say that we've got our priorities a little bit whacked up here? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, we didn't make that up, right?
No,
I mean,
we did a show. We did a show talking about how the
government interceded and said,
yeah,
we can't have this in school anymore because it's bad for young people's health.
Right.
But we're not going to do anything about sites that cause older people to interact with younger people in inappropriate ways. And blows my mind, right? I mean,
did we talk about on that show?
Mic. What else is there to say? How our society is screwed up?
We talked about on that show, one of the reasons that young people are unhealthy is because they're less physically active. Well, gee, I wonder why that might be. You know,
their thumbs are in good shape.
During recess, we can use our phone. During lunch, we can use our phone. So what do? We sit around on the phone instead of being physically active.
Why would we go to the swing set? Why would we bounce the ball?
The physical activity, this one's not hypothetical, right? Is proven time and again in studies that if you keep a child physically active at points throughout the day, they will learn better.
Right. The worst thing schools did, and this is proven factually, in elementary school was to do away recess.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden math scores went down. Why? Because young people need to move every so often, right? It's why you can't take away gym class. It's why you can't take away music class. You say, music? What do you do in music? You just stand and sing. Have you ever been in an elementary music class? They're tapping stuff. They're hitting sticks together. They're clapping their hands. They're stomping their feet.
They're active.
All of that movement makes the synapses in the brain go together. And so then they go back to math class or science class and they learn more because they've had that body movement. Justin jokes with me all the time that he said, well, what'd you think about during mowing time? Because I will go out and mow and I have a walk behind mower and I think, because I do some of my best thinking out there because it's quiet. I don't have my phone. And what am I doing? I'm walking around the acres pushing a 20-inch push mower.
In nature.
All right. In nature, releasing all the good pheromones that the trees and the grasses do and listening to the birds sing, right? And I do and I come in and I solve a lot of the problems that I have in my life.
While you're mowing.
While I'm mowing out there without my phone and I'm getting exercise. It works for all of us, but it's even more studied and known in children than it is in old people.
The two laws I have no problem with, passing today is no child under 16 accessible on, major social media platforms. And we talked about in previous shows. You have to define what a major social media platform is, but we're talking about all the typical
But at least
suspects.
start, right? Get a start somewhere. Start with some of them.
Yep. And you say, how do we enforce that? You put it on the companies. I've said that from the beginning. They're the ones that figured out how to keep us addicted. They certainly can figure out how to keep up to 16-year-olds off the platform, and make the fines huge. Well, those are unfair. No, they're not. Just don't break the rules and then you won't get fined.
Hey, here's one. Use the fines to pay down the national debt.
I like that.
Okay.
Yep. Or
not that it'll even come close, but I'm just saying, we can do something good with the money.
I mean, we could pay down the debt. You could put it in. You could set it aside into accounts that gets distributed to young people once they turn 18.
You could build whatever. You could build new bridges or roads with it. You could buy books for libraries. There's all kinds of positive things you could do with all those media fines for not doing what the law says.
So that's one, is, immediately pass a law that prevents anybody who's under the age of 16 from having a social media account. Okay. It's just a law. It's simple. You don't have to debate it anymore. It's not a question of whether or not a parent wants you to have one or blah, blah, blah. No, you just can't. It's just illegal. It's illegal.
Second thing, put chocolate milk back in the schools. No, what's your second? What's your second one?
And the second one is no phones no phone use during the school day.
How about no phones inside the building?
See, then you're going to get into, though, the reason I think that gets harder to pass is you're going to say, well, depending on how a kid gets to school, or gets home from school, depending on where you are, you might want your phone after or before the school day.
Why?
But it's simple. You're not allowed to have your phone on you in the classroom. So schools are welcome to say it's in your locker,
right?
Or it's in your backpack if you're still in elementary school and you don't have a locker. But you may not have it, and you say again, how do you enforce it?
I want it to be more restrictive, but I'll show how I want to get. I'll be a problem solver today. I'll go along with that.
Well, that would be better than what we have.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I will settle for that.
And I think that
I will settle
through.
for that. It's not as constrictive as I want it.
Yeah.
But I will settle for that because it would be an improvement over where we are now, and it would be more beneficial to young people than we are currently as adults benefiting young people.
Yep. And
that's our job. Right?
And none of this says that a student can't have a phone or can't use a computer. It says that while you're in school, and up until the age of 16, you won't have social media at all. Once you're 16, you're welcome to have social media, and you're welcome to use your social media if your parents are okay with it when you're not in school. You can
talk face to face. You don't have to be sitting at the same table and texting each other back and forth. You can practice real interpersonal communication, and that is actually talking with the people you are sitting with.
So why do we have this show today, Lance? What was the point?
Well, because here at True Chat, this wonderful company we work for, they have a mission, and the mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully, we've got you to think on today's show. If you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, that's great too. Hopefully, you thought about it, all right? Let us know how you feel. Email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. Tell your family and friends about it. If they say, I want to start thinking in my day, then tell them they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning as a podcast. Those same episodes are heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States and parts of Canada. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance. I want to thank Jackson.
Special thanks to recording producer Levi LaForge and senior producer Bradley Bush. And thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.